Did you know that there were 6 Chinese survivors of the Titanic? 8 Chinese men are listed on the ship's manifest as boarding the Titanic, and 6 of them survived. This is their stories. Out of the 705 survivors of the Titanic, these 6 Chinese survivors were the only ones who were turned away at the American border and forced to stay on the ship until they were shipped out the next day. Because of the anti-Chinese sentiment in America at the time, when the public found out that there were any Chinese survivors at all, they were instantly demonized. They were accused of pretending to be women to get on the lifeboats, or that they were even stowaways in the lifeboats to begin with, even though they had a room here at the front of the ship. In fact, it's the location of their room combined with the fact that they were shipbuilders and a lot of luck that 5 of them happened upon a lifeboat that had empty seats with no one waiting for them. Len Lam and Li Ling unfortunately did not make it, but Fang Long was only able to survive the Arctic waters by somehow being able to hoist himself on top of a floating piece of wood, and he was actually the last person to be rescued out of the freezing waters. Sound familiar? This is actually a still from a deleted scene out of the movie Titanic where James Cameron decided to steal this man's story and give it to Rose. This is the actual Fang Long, who ended up in America and started a life and family here. Fang Long never even told his wife or children that he was a survivor of the Titanic, assumingly because Fang Long came to America as a paper son. At the time of the Chinese Exclusion Act, one of the only people who weren't excluded from America were merchants. Oftentimes when the merchants came back the next time, they would claim that they had a son, and then when they returned back to China, they would sell those papers. Which is why he never told his family about the Titanic, because he would then risk people finding out that he was in the country deceptively. Tom's father was only confirmed as being the actual Fang Long because he stayed in contact with some of the survivors. In one of those letters, he wrote a poem where he stated that he only survived by holding onto a piece of driftwood. Tom only found out that his father was a survivor of the Titanic because one time Fang Long accidentally told Tom's cousin that he survived a shipwreck. One of the survivors, Chung Chip, ended up in England shortly after the Titanic and died of pneumonia. This is survivor Ah Lam. He kind of fell off the map after the Titanic as his last documented location was on a ship headed back towards Asia. This is Ling He, who after the Titanic ended up back in the UK working on ships when World War I started. After the war, a lot of the Chinese ship workers were repatriatized to other countries. Ling He's paperwork trails off as well, but the last place he was documented was when he was repatriatized to Calcutta, India. This is Li Bing. After the Titanic, he immigrated to Canada and worked at a cafe, where he started a new life and had a family. He was the only Chinese survivor who openly told people that he survived the Titanic, when he would oftentimes tell patrons about how he survived the shipwreck. It took me a year to finally be able to have access to watch this 6 documentary. Watch this documentary because yes, it's a story about survivors of the Titanic, but it also tells a part of Asian history that we should never forget.